Okay, we're live. All
Yay.
right. So
Hello. Hi.
today, Renee and I are back. We're going to get deeper into the precepts of creativity. So Renee in her book has laid out the 10 precepts of creativity, sort of starting out by defining creativity, what it is and what it is not, what different scholars have coined it as or narrowed it down to, and also some of the religious sources of creativity. So we're going to dive into that today. Um, so I'm going to just jump in with this statement that you have from David Bohm. He states that the word education is derived from the Latin root educare, which means to draw forth from within. This suggests interaction on the part of the learner and the reader. Holding this book is not enough. You must participate and interact. Anything you glean will be from you. Any discovery you have will come from something within you. So,
Right.
Renee, do you want to comment on that before we go further into the book?
Yes. And I mean, just now I don't know if you call yourself an educator, but once you're an educator, you realize what works and what doesn't. And just pouring knowledge into somebody's brain is not learning. Learning
Right.
has to be experienced and it has to be a discovery. And so the more you can get your learner, your class to engage and to feel that it's relevant, the more impact you're going to have. So in reading a book, of course, I'm going to share my findings with you, but what I wanted to do in this book was get people to actually grab a pot. So people can't really describe God. So many religions find a way to use a metaphor to say what God is. Like the Kabbalah talks about light and Kabbalah, and that would be Jewish mysticism. And the Old Testament Jewish religion talked about God being like a rock, and um, I don't know. The Bhagavad Gita talks about warrior and war, and like the war winners and losers or whatever. Anyway, everybody has a metaphor for God. So I thought, hey, since creativity is like my God, I'm going to make up a metaphor as an object lesson so that it can see if it holds up. And need a torpedo, it held up. So I found the 10 precepts that I felt after all my research were really important to discuss. And then, of course, the final precept is the why. This is not just what creativity is, but why we're creative. So at the end of chapter 4, you discover that, and it's life changing. So
Yeah. Yeah. And then you go on to say, you've got your pot, I love it. You go on just after that and you talk about Plato and Plato's forms and these ideal prototypes that we all possess the knowledge of at birth, this Platonian idea, right?
yeah,
And so then from that, you conclude that creativity is within all of us. And this
right.
is very Jungian too, like in the archetypal type of,
Yeah.
psychology, where we all just have this well of creativity, like the caricatures, the actual metaphors and like psychic impressions of creativity just in us waiting to be expressed and created. It's
And
awesome.
those ideas and thought forms and truths are they're passed down to us in what I think Jung called archetypes, right?
Mhm.
And so we don't even have to talk about them; they just exist, and they're not just in dreams. They're when you think of colors and just roles people play, and so
Right.
all of these things are within us. And so, as a teacher and as an educator, it's all stuff we already know, but sometimes in society we don't pay attention to it. So I get to shine the light on something that you might already know. Voice training is kind of like that,
Mhm.
because I teach like this primal way of singing, of using your voice the way a baby uses his or their voice. So
Right.
it's something that we knew already when we had to call our mom if we're out in the fields. We knew how to use our voice correctly and not wreck it by calling for our mom in a cry or a whine. So we want
Right.
to return to that. So I think that's fascinating. But so educare means we have to draw forth from within this discovery, or it's just ink on a page.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then you talk about metaphor as kind of the sort of the, I don't want to say watering down of archetypes, but it's sort of like our our functional way of expressing archetypes, right? So that's how physicists explain complex theories to non-scientists. It's how
Yeah,
many believers describe their God or their faith in God. And
right.
you quote
So
Christ. Yeah.
Because we have, we are stuck in the five or six senses that we have, and the only way into our brain are those portals. What do we see? What would you smell? But really, it is so vast. You can't narrow creativity or God, for that matter, into just into this physicality. It's so much. Obviously, it's in the stars. It's everywhere. So all we can do is give it a little something that a human can understand. That we can touch and feel and see and maybe hear and taste and smell, not the
Right.
pot. But that's all we have to understand anything, because we're human. We're in this human body. So, but our soul feels and learns and discovers, and we use our five senses to do that. So anyway, bleh, the metaphor is the pot,
Hmm.
and I use this one, and it's big and it's blue, and that there's an inside and an outside. And so what I talk about in the beginning is why the metaphor is going to work, because we can see what's on the outside. It's fixed, it's firm, it's concrete. This is anything seen. This is anything concrete. So what would that be in the world of creativity? What do you see? Well, you see art, you see paintings, you see sculptures, you see dances, you see costumes and films. It's anything seen. And then the inside is anything unseen. So this could be dark if there wasn't a light shining in it. It's dark. It's what's on the inside of creativity. And sometimes it would be your dreams or your history, family history, your emotions, your fears, risk, things that you can't see that creativity, creativity is all about your imagination. Well, you can't see that. So the inside is the abstract. It's the
Right.
unseen abstract, and the outside is the concrete seen. So abstract, concrete.
Right.
That
And,
that's
and
it's easy to wrap your head around that when you think of the pot, especially
right.
if there's dark soil in there.
And would you say it's also sort of a like the subconscious on the inner and then the conscious on the
Right.
outer?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So, and I think we talked about this last week. I mean, you just have to pick it when you're trying to write, when you're trying to create a scaffolding or a theory. So I used internal and external,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
abstract and concrete is fun, and internal and external is great. Conscious and unconscious is great, but I just felt like internal and external kind of tells it.
Yeah.
And it's a double metaphor, though, so don't freak out. The other metaphor is the micro and the macro,
Mhm.
which means the individual and society. So sometimes my creativity, like if I write in my journal or something, that is from me, and then the external is how it fits into society. So there's an internal and external because I'm a single person in a mass of humanity. And so that is the internal and the external, the individual and society. It's double
Mhm.
metaphor.
And I just have to read this before we skate over it because I think it might be my favorite line in the whole chapter. You say, inside the
Oh,
pot, we have empty space. It is necessary for creative work to occur. If we don't have time to think, time to germinate ideas, space to imagine, then our creativity won't flourish. Because I think you know how I feel about space because you've taken.
Uh-huh.
And
Yes.
so, yeah, my son is here, so it is what it is. But yeah, so space is the sacred inner container that the outer container protects, and space is the womb, right? The womb is that empty void from which everything springs. So this metaphor I can never get enough of. I have to keep bringing it up over and over and over.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's only a metaphor. It's not limited to just a metaphor. It's real. Like let's
Right.
you always bring up flowers, right? If you put a flower in a pot without any space for those baby roots to grow, then it's going to wilt. So the space is real. We need
Yeah,
space in a literal way as well,
absolutely.
and in a non-literal way. So we
Yeah,
need space on the abstract and the concrete, on the internal and the external.
totally.
It's both. Of course, you love that.
Yeah, of course. You just had to call that out. So yeah, let's dive deeper into the metaphor. So you talked about the macro and the micro and the internal and the external. And then you talked about also society as the macro, and the internal being society's inner workings, and then the
Right.
external is how creativity is manifested in society as
Mhm.
well.
Right, because when you take a bunch of internal individuals, because that's the inside, internal individuals, how does that manifest? It manifests into the society that we see, right? So if we have a bunch of people on the people doing a certain thing, it's going to manifest as a certain society, right? So that's the internal and the external, the individual and how it relates to the society.
Right.
Got it? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you talk about usefulness. So usefulness obviously is like what gets creativity to proliferate, especially in society.
Right.
But it's not like the be all end all, but it's a part of it, right?
Yeah, well, there's 10, and one of the definitions that has been floating around for a long time is that it has to be useful.
Uh-huh.
And, I just use a really stupid example, like you got to change the light bulb and you don't have a ladder. So, in order to change the light bulb, you just stack up some crates and you stand up on that and you just were creative. But what happens when you start having a creativity filter through your brain is when you do grab a ladder, you grab it with your head and you go, wow, somebody invented this and I benefit from that. You don't even think it consciously, but when you start running everything through that creativity filter, you just have this appreciation for every invention that ever made your life easier. So when somebody contributes something to society, they had to have the idea first on the individual level. And
Mhm.
so then they contribute it, and if it's useful, then that's deemed creative. And then if you want to talk about the unseen world and how, well, what do you mean useful? Like on the inside of my soul, I guess it would be like if you meditate, you can't see what it's doing to your brain. You can't see what it's doing to your nervous system. You can't see any of those things per se, and it's unseen, but it definitely keeps you from harm. It lowers your blood pressure so that you don't have a heart attack. I mean, there's seen results. So on the internal, you have a behavior that is creative, and it manifests itself on the external.
Right.
Singing, singing, dancing, praying, um, you know, whatever. It's useful to you as an individual if you do a creative act. We could name a million of them. Very useful to you physically, emotionally, and mentally.
Yeah,
And
and the way you phrase it in the book is that internally it's sort of a therapy, right? It's a
yeah,
therapeutic
yeah,
use.
yeah.
And then on the external, you talk about the ladder. Can you talk a little bit about the ladder and explain what you mean by that?
Well, just that it's such a stupid invention, but I can't reach the light bulb. And so
Right.
I can't find a ladder. I just moved into my apartment, and so I literally stack up crates. I had to call upon the power of creativity to make my own ladder. It's
Uh-huh. I love that.
yeah, it's
It's
really
like a classic science experiment
yeah.
with the monkeys. Noah, shush. He always wants to contribute. But then you also make the point too, like you're talking here about Guernica by Picasso, and what's the
Oh,
usefulness of art like that? Like obviously it has some use, right? Not just to be like highbrow and snobbery,
yeah,
it's not like the
yeah.
use is, and what you say is that art can function as a warning sign to culture and help shape values as
Mhm.
it depicts the ideologies of the time. And that reminds
Yeah,
me of the Kennedy quote actually that I sent to you, which I'm gonna have to pull
yeah,
up.
yeah. Go ahead.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it should be right around here. Okay, so when power leads men toward arrogance, poetry reminds him of his limitations. When power narrows the areas of man's concern, poetry reminds him of the richness and diversity of his existence. When power corrupts, poetry cleanses, for art establishes the basic human truth, which must serve as the touchstone of our judgment. John F. Kennedy.
Gosh, how did he? That is just so perfect. The
It's perfect.
touchstone of
Yeah.
our judgment as a society and as an individual. Yeah. Well, and I always think about Picasso because I don't know if you study Picasso or you just look at like 20 of his paintings, let's just say,
Yeah.
there's really not of people do think he kind of has an ugly thing going on, but really he was not painting war and hell and gruesome images. That was not his thing. But
Mhm.
he really wanted to make a statement. He really
Right.
wanted to. It's huge. It's like the whole side of my garage. It's a
Yeah.
huge painting. And so I'm sure he didn't want to spend, however long he spent, a year, 2 years, I don't know, on such a huge painting. But he really had something to say, and it probably broke his heart every day. And he
Yeah.
intended to break the hearts of everyone about bringing that awareness to them. And it's the job of the artist to be useful like that. But
To
it's
break
useful.
our hearts so that we remember that we have them. right?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. And even just beauty, because we talk about beauty, and in your class we talked about that. You surround yourself with beauty. So if you're just a person who doesn't paint or anything, but you like to make a really cool coffee table arrangement, you
Mhm.
want to be surrounded with beauty. There's something very creative with that, and it makes you surrounded by something you love, and that's functional for you, so that you are surrounded by what you love.
Right.
So anyway, anything like that is creative, because you can meet people all the time that you have a beautiful house or whatever, and you tell them that you wrote a book or you paint a painting. They go, "Oh, I'm not creative." You just
Yeah.
you just decorated this whole house. You're surrounded in beauty. That's a creative act. Anyway,
Totally.
so that's useful. Useful.
Yeah. And so the usefulness can be in sort of perpetuating values, or like satire, a political tool, or
Yeah,
it can be like that actual practical usefulness of like a ladder, right?
yeah.
So what do we got so far? We've got usefulness.
On the inside
We've
and the
got,
outside, on the
yeah,
internal and the external. Right.
yeah. And then is that what we've got so far? Is number one is
Yeah,
useful?
and you said something about satire, and so that's why sometimes useful, the latter is what comes to your mind, because useful, physical, useful, functional, house, survival,
Mhm.
um, and yet you said something about satire. Who was it? Like Trevor Noah? Who's the? I
Mhm.
can't remember. Is it Trevor Noah?
Yeah.
And then there was somebody in the East who almost got killed from his satire.
Really?
Yeah, because they're trying to point out through comedy and through
Right.
laughter the ills of society. That's
Yeah.
quite a calling. They're
Yeah.
not just funny.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're
Yeah, I
insightful.
think satire is some of the most powerful. I mean, I won't like listen to politics. I'll listen to satire because I have to have it framed in such a way that reminds
Mhm.
me that this is a complete circus, you know?
Right. Who is it?
Like,
Is Bill Maher? Would you call him satirical? Bill
yeah,
Maher.
I'd say so. He I think he's kind of literal in some ways, but overall satirical.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, my he's been a staple in my household since, I was like, I don't know, 13 or
Mhm.
something. My parents love him.
Mhm. Did we talk
Um,
about South Park? Who wrote the Book of Mormon?
That's the South Park people. Yeah. I mean,
Right. And that's
they're
satire.
wonderful.
That's
Totally.
satire.
Totally.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
we can move on from function now, but those are all worth, because they're so different, such different
Right.
expressions of something that's supposed to move culture forward, not just because we can have light now through the ladder, but because we
Right.
have internal light. So that's the internal and the external.
Yeah. So that's what we have. Number one precept is internal, external. Number two is useful. Number three is novelty. So let's dive into that.
Okay. Okay, so we're on three. Okay,
We
so
are.
novelty is something new, and I think that the best way you can think of why it has to be novel, because obviously somebody already invented the wheel, right? So we can't reinvent the wheel, and somebody already invented fire, and somebody already invented the light and all of that. So how do we keep being novel if we're born in 2022 and everything's already been invented? Well, we get to retell an old story in a new way, which is what we do with our film, with movies and plays. And that's my example of novelty, because of course I want to argue with every expert that says it has to be novel. I want to say, no, it doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't have to be novel. It doesn't have to be anything. Anything that has been done before, which, it's all been said and done before. I think Ecclesiastes that says that, right? It's
Nothing
all,
new under the sun, right?
thank you very much. Nothing new under the sun. But when it's novel to us, and we discover it, or we watch a movie that's already remade three times, A Star is Born. I think, it's time to retire some of these stories. But the earliest form of creativity, according to thespians, which is hilarious to me, because dancers will tell you what the earliest form of artistic expression was. They'll tell you it was the dance.
Mhm.
Musicians will tell you it was the drum, but thespians will tell you that the earliest form of creative expression was gathering around the fire at
Yeah.
night and passing on their knowledge and their stories and their narratives and their myth and all of that. And
Right.
so I think that's funny that, and they can prove it. They all,
Right.
academically scholarly prove why it's the first one. But you know, a singer will also tell you that it's the voice, it's the
Of
singing that
course. But then also there's, what about like making spears? Of course, that was a practical, very like, we've got to go kill woolly mammoths or whatever, but that has
Yep.
creativity, intrinsic in it as well. And the evolution of tools and all, so it's everything we do is creative. There's no, we can't, the origin point is the Big Bang. At what
Yeah.
point, there was no, like before that,
There
you
was
can't
nothing.
measure anything, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we will always end up with that even mid podcast is that it's what is it? The girl, my friend Carrie, she read it and she said the isness. She
Yeah.
taught me that word isness, and I was like, it's true. It's once you start seeing it through the everything through your filter too, it's overwhelming. So anyway, okay. So anyway, what was that novel? So
Yeah. So before, sorry, I
go.
want to tell the story that you put in here that anthropologists concur that a woman created the first pot out of necessity since animal skins must have leaked, and that excavations of hundreds of pots and urns have become a symbol for motherhood and creativity. So even in that example, right, is
Huh?
not only is the pot so deeply meaningful for all these reasons, right, but it's also one of these, like, the necessity of bringing water, sating the thirst. There's just so much there, so I just had to read that part. But now let's go ahead and dive
Okay.
into the novel.
Okay. So anyway, that's novel. So on the internal, something new to me would be something new, like I made up a song. And maybe I copied somebody from 100 years ago. Who knows, right? Because things circulate. And like Elizabeth Gilbert talks about those ideas that just fly in. So ideas can circulate. I can grab one and I can think, oh, this is novel to me. It doesn't matter if it's been done before because it's still novel to me. And I still get to connect deeply with whatever it is I wrote, the song that I wrote. And it will function as a useful tool in my life. So it's novel and then it functions as useful both on the internal and the external. So it's like the house that Jack built, right? And
Right.
then on the external, um, if something is novel and new to the external culture, we'll look at technology. Yeah. So everybody kind of flocks to it and it becomes us. The
Yeah.
newest technology will become us.
Yeah.
So anything novel is creative, and in society, it's going to manifest on the external, and the internal is how it changes us. So how have we changed since we started texting, I don't love you anymore, I break up with you? As a society, you can just text that note now.
Hmm.
You
Right.
can just break up with someone. So how have we changed on the inside
Yeah.
as a society because of the external discovery of technology? That is too broad. We're not going to answer that right now, but it kind of displays those things in society that are internal, external, individual, and how it manifests into a society.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just leave with this quote: expressing our humanity through story is ancient, but we find novel ways of expressing in order to bring more relevance. Storytelling itself is not novel, but we as a culture strive to tell stories in new ways, in new mediums, serving both the micro and the macro.
Right on. And I hate to admit it out loud to you, but how many movies a week do I watch? I never watched TV, but
Mhm.
I will sit there on Netflix and HBO and I will find a movie and get so lost in story. And I can't feel guilty about it because it's so well done now.
No.
And the production values are amazing and you just get so sucked in. So
But it's
I
not even that. I mean, it is the substrata of the psyche. That is our archetypal food these days. Where else are we going to get it? We don't have myth. We don't have shamans. That's where it comes from. And so, I do the same thing. Like I look for movies. Like I watched Coach Carter with Samuel L. Jackson recently. And as an aside, it was really low production value for like what I
Oh,
remember that era being. I think it's only made in 2005. But anyway, the story, finding stories like that, like these like black representation stories, or stories about the
right.
underdog or whatever. This can be a source of inspiration that's real, that actually bolsters us and buoys us and moves us forward.
Yeah.
So I really don't believe that it's like this. It depends on the
Wasting
motive, right?
time. It's not. It's
Yeah.
not a waste of time. It's a good filler of space and time.
Yeah.
And it's always the hero's journey too.
Exactly. It can't not be. It can't not be. So, I mean, I
Okay.
just, I want to like let us have compassion for ourselves, that if we're not just trying to escape the world and, watching TV 24 hours a day, we're feeding our psyche, it's just
True.
like the artist states, it's just a for the psyche rather than, whatever.
Right.
So,
It's
yeah.
okay.
The next one, so we're on number
Alright.
4 now, right? Is transformative.
Transformative. And it's just see how it goes in a sequence, because sometimes that hero's journey transforms us. It changes us just by learning. Like my friend Andrea, who she was going to major in, I don't remember, let's say science or something, and then she went and she saw a play, and she decided after that, watching the play, that she was going to change her major to theater, and she did. So it's just transformative sometimes. And I saw a play. I saw the Vagina Monologues when I was, I don't know, 38 maybe, and it changed the course of my life. So it is literally, sorry, I said the wrong word with a
No,
boy.
it's perfectly fine.
Anyway, it was transformative. So just as Picasso's, 20 by 20 painting or whatever, 30 by 20 painting was transformative for him
Mhm.
individually and for society to reflect what was going on in the world with the war and the ugliness of it and the mothers that lost their children, and just to like face off with the kind of species that we were being at the time and still are. That is transformative. And hopefully, the Bill Mahers and these people who are doing satire and even other things other than art. What else is transformative? Any just, the printing press,
Yeah.
um, the discovery of penicillin.
Well,
The,
you even phrase it and you say creativity is at the center of our personal quest for change. We change our eating habits, our job situations, our place of residence, our friendships, our philosophies, our routines. So all like these identity formations, and even getting healthy and changing our diet and starting a new exercise regimen. And, these are all creative acts. No, you need to be quiet. This boy is going to be getting the privileges taken away after this podcast. Anyway, so you're talking about like some of the most mundane drives or actions that we go through that come from the creative drive.
that's right.
They're all
That's
fueled
what
by that.
And that's what I have to remember when I'm going scrolling down, Instagram, and everybody's showing off their body. It just feels like so superficial, but really, when you run it through the creativity lens, it's not so superficial. It's actually very transformative to even think that we can physically,
Yeah, I mean that is beautiful what you just said. Because almost every time, and maybe every time, 99.9%, when you run it through the lens of creativity, it passes the test. And that to me is like the ultimate compassion. It's no matter what it is, it's creative. And that's why I say you can take a shit and that's creative. Because
you always love it. It always,
well, it comes back to this is creativity is the ultimate love. It's the ultimate mother nurturing whatever you draw, your mom's going to love it. She's going to hang it on the fridge, and that's how
I love that.
Interacts with us. Ooh, come on.
So as far as transformative, if we want to break it down internal and external, then the transformative power of creativity is alive in me in an individual fashion, as in, aside from taking a shit, if my boyfriend breaks up with me and I write a song and it helps me to heal and it makes me feel better, and then I put it out at the coffee shop and it speaks to those 40 or 50 people that are there. It speaks to them, and it's going to help them heal when their hearts get broken, right? So on the internal, it speaks to me. I connect to my deeper self. I work through my breakup, my pain through a creative act, and then it goes to the society and impacts the society in that way. So on the inside and on the outside, internal, external, and transforms not only me but my society as well.
Right. So it's catharsis on the inner.
Perfect word.
And we're able to transform our interior landscape, even digesting difficult emotions, moving through grief or whatever. And then on the macro level, how like how is it's becoming a part of the cultural narrative. It's becoming
Mm-hmm.
part of our archetypal wellspring, right? And
Wow.
and
Yeah.
so adding to the kind of the what's the like the creative material that society has available to it.
Yeah. The milieu,
Yeah,
if you
like it.
just kidding. And every you could say just we could just pick one of these components and talk about it and include all nine or 10 because they're all deeply connected. So I can't say transformative without having said the word novel, without having said the word useful, without having said the internal and external.
Mm-hmm.
They're not interchangeable, but they're made of the same stuff. They're just they're just different sided. You're just
Right.
looking at the different sides of it. But we can be done with transformative because
Okay, let me end it with this quote. I love your quotes. Your writing is beautiful.
thank you.
It is. We need creativity to transport us to the hidden realm, the abstract, the unseen, in order to transcend and find permanence in the moment, which is eternal. Okay, done with that one.
And that's running it through the lens of creativity, especially in the hustle and bustle and running around, and you just take a moment and you go, wow, I just touched down with something super creative and I didn't realize it, which
Mhm.
connects me with everyone who's ever been creative since the beginning of time, right? It connects me with my deeper self. It's just that mindfulness, I guess, what the you Buddhists call it. It's mindfulness, but it makes you mindful of what you're doing, why you're doing it, where you're going, and where we've been. I
Yeah.
think so.
Yeah. It does. Well, because it's transient, it's both transient and eternal. So when we're able to give ourselves completely to it, we we're interfacing with the eternal rather than the transient, you know?
And it's William Blake that said, what is that 4-line poem? Eternity in a grain of sand is how it ends. Like you can see eternity in just that tiny little speck of sand. And it's exactly what you said. But there's 3 words here that we're talking about: transformative,
Mhm.
transportive, and what's the other one? I want to say transmute. I can't even remember what word it
Oh,
is.
well, number 5 is transportive. So we
Okay,
haven't
this is
even gotten
transportive.
there yet.
Okay, we haven't got there.
Um,
Okay. But
Sustaining, maybe? Is that the next
no,
one?
it's transportive because
Okay.
it takes creativity for me then to,
Transcendent. Sorry.
I don't think it's in there. I don't think I use transcendent. But what I was trying not to say was transportive. So we're talking about transformative. Creativity is
Yeah.
transformative, and we want to just
Transformative.
let that
Cathartic. Yeah.
let's
And
have
so
its own thing.
yeah,
Um,
let's move on to 5, and then I think we should end, and we'll do the remaining
okay, next time.
4.
Okay.
I can't count. The remaining 5 after that.
Okay.
But before we dive into transportive, you use this word autotelic, which I think everyone should write down, learn this word. When we approach a task as autotelic, meaning the doing of the thing is an end in itself. So autotelic means the doing of the thing is an end in itself. Then we enjoy intrinsic rewards. Essentially, we find happiness within ourselves and not in controlling outside forces, which
Mhm.
brings fulfillment. Physically,
Mhm.
this is flow state, characterized by the shift from beta to alpha waves, which are responsible for more relaxed meditative states of mind. Ironically, the shift in brainwaves enhances creativity. Okay. Then
Thank
you
you,
can,
Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi,
yes,
right? Once
yeah,
again, Mihaly
totally.
Csikszentmihalyi.
It is,
And
yes.
there's something called automatic, which everybody knows what automatic means, and the distinct difference between autotelic and automatic, I think, is obvious. When you're on automatic, there isn't that depth to it, and that not necessarily deep awareness. Because when you're in flow, you lose track of time. You don't realize how much time is like you're really in a whole different state.
Mhm.
But autotelic means you're not after some result in the end. So my mom, I've always told you this, is a perfect example of somebody who she just constantly made stuff. She was from that age when women didn't sit down. She was always crocheting or painting or cooking or sculpting or so she was always doing something. she it brought her, she must have lived most of her life in bliss.
Yeah.
She must have been in bliss all the time. And I didn't even realize it until she got this old, and
Yeah.
she stopped. And she stopped. And now I'm like, where's my mom? Like just 3 months ago, before this last bout with pneumonia, my mom was making the new baby a quilt at, 79 years old, shuffling
Wow.
in her Uggs and sewing with her little, rickety hands. She never
Yeah.
stopped. And I didn't realize it. So I had a student today sharing with me the frustrations that you feel, and it didn't have to do with singing. It just had to do with doing life.
Mhm.
Life is hard to do sometimes. And in
Yeah.
my heart, I'm not a therapist, but I thought, what is it that brings you that bliss and that joy? And what creative outlet do you have so that you can offset this doing of life
Mhm.
with being in your own skin and in your creativity?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
couldn't say it though. I didn't want to, I just wanted to listen, but I'm saying it now. So
Yeah.
anyway, um, bring me back. Where were we?
Okay. Well, what you're saying, it makes me want to go, I was thinking today, I was thinking about this because I'm having similar things around me, I'm thinking of, my mom braided my hair today. I can't braid my own hair. I can't do a French braid. Never
But
have
you
been.
can braid sweetgrass?
What?
But you can braid
I could
sweetgrass?
braid, maybe I could braid wheatgrass. I don't know. But what I was thinking was the disintegration of the, not
Hmm.
just matrilineal, but all passed down habits, learning how to sew. My mom's grandma used to make this, famous potato soup that no one knows the recipe to, that she could have made a quilt. These things that we don't know how to do, and how disempowered we are to feed our own psyche because we lack these, small little crafty things we can do with our hands. I think on
Yeah.
a psychological level, not being able to do those things disempowers us, so that when we do need that creative, well to be filled, we go and we watch TV, which is consuming someone else's creative.
Uh-huh.
You know?
You nailed it. You so nailed it. And while we may be enriched, it's not the same. It's not the same as that feeling you get when you wrote a poem or made a cute little thing. What is it you make? The essential oils, or you just
Right.
work with your senses, and you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. And I don't
yeah,
have the skills. That's why I make stuff that little kids can make, ultimately. Like it's
right.
just about getting my hands dirty.
But think how
So,
useful that is, and you're also experiencing that autotelic flow.
for
So
sure.
it is
Absolutely.
useful because it's doing things to your internal realm that we
Exactly.
can't
Yeah.
see, and it's bringing you joy and all that.
Yeah. But if I could wave my magic wand, or if I had a daughter or whatever, she would know how to sew, and she, because it's empowering. She would know how to weave. She would, these arts that are part of the archetypal web,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
how archetypal is knowing how to weave. Like we've got Aradney, we've got the Greeks, there's so much there. So
Oh, you should have been Sharon's daughter. She had a loom.
mhm.
My mom had 6 foot loom in the living room. She was crazy. I'm telling you, I forgot all about the loom. You should have been her daughter, because I literally wrote down in a book somewhere that my mom taught me all these skills that are unnecessary for my generation. I don't care about canning peaches, right? I don't
Right.
care about sewing napkins and table runners. I literally wrote that down, and it was not, I wasn't like 20. I was probably 35. I take
Mhm.
it back. I take
Yeah.
it back because it is part of our archetypal, what'd you call it?
Substrata, I don't know, the web of the, I don't know, the
Web.
archetypal.
Yes.
Yeah.
As women and as a village and all that
Yeah.
interconnectedness.
I
Yeah.
totally, yeah. And that's why I think that generation from the 50s onward, that like as convenience was coming into play and becoming prioritized, it was actually stealing away those little moments of creative
Yeah.
thought. And
Yeah.
the moment where you decide you're going to buy a TV dinner, or the moment you decide that you're going to, just buy cans of peaches from the
Mhm.
store or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it's coming back, this whole
Yeah.
let's learn how to sew and let's crochet, because it's not necessarily what you're saying is it's not about that productivity. It's about the autotelic moment where you're doing something that you enjoy just to enjoy it. And it might turn out shitty and it might turn
Yeah.
out useful, but it doesn't matter because it's useful to your soul.
Yeah, yeah. And it may become useful again as we have the breakdown of like supply chains and things, and we're going to start having to be more sustainable and whatever. So
Yeah.
we may come back full circle and get that unexpected gift from major changes in society. But we're getting
Yes.
so far afield, even though I love it.
Okay.
I want to
Okay.
bring it
So
back to the
actually, it was
transportive.
all reinforcing. It was
Yeah,
all
yeah,
reinforcing all of that. Okay. We've done the first 5. We can
yeah.
now be done.
Okay,
Good
so
luck
I'm
with
just
any
I'm gonna
meditation
end
with
it
Noah.
with a quote because I have to, and this is just
All
my
right.
train today. The force of creativity drives us to take ideas from our minds and explore or express them externally. Creativity urges us to interact with our inner world, our unconscious, and in a sense is what transports the material from the interior realm to the exterior realm, which is the same thing that JFK was saying. It's in a
Mm-hmm.
sense, it's like a reverse psychopomp. Like the psychopomp is the figure who takes the souls, from the living to the underworld and helps them cross through the sticks,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so creativity is like brings the material of the soul and of the sacred and of God out into
Right.
the
Yeah.
manifestation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's therefore it takes creativity to transport the creativity to the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes creativity to bring it from within to just myself, and then it takes creativity to then transmute that to the world.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get there. Okay.
We will.
This is so fun. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Oh yeah, and meditating. I guess should we save it for next time because we're so far over. Let's
I
save
don't
it.
know what time it is.
Yeah,
I
let's
can't
save
see
it.
what time is it. Okay, but I was teasing you anyway. I was like, good luck meditating with Noah.
Yeah, well, he ran
Good luck with
downstairs,
that.
but he's occasionally yelling at me. So,
Okay. All right. Okay.
all right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
I'll
you.
see you next
Love
time.
you. Bye.
I'm sorry we went over.
No, it's
Bye.
totally fine. Bye.
Bye.